We good? Yeah. Okay. All right. Well, thanks everybody for coming. My name is Andy. I lead the ecosystem team at Forta Network, and I'm going to talk about how AI and ML-based threat detection can save Web3. So this is a smart contract security related talk. A little bit about Forta, if you're not familiar. Forta is a decentralized monitoring network for layer 1 and layer 2 blockchains. So the analogy I like to use is we're like a giant security camera and alarm system. We're middleware, so we sit on top of these chains, and we've got hundreds of cameras running on the network that are watching for stuff that looks weird, suspicious, exploits, phishing attacks, things like that. We spun out of OpenZeppelin in fall of 2021, so we've been around for about 2.5 years, and over that time have worked with some prominent companies in the space around threat detection. We generate a lot of data, and we provide it to a lot of companies as well. Okay, so quick agenda. I'm going to talk about detecting exploits in advance, how we do that at Forta. I'm also going to talk about how we use machine learning to identify malicious smart contracts. And I'll finish by talking about why we should start shifting our focus from threat detection to threat prevention. It's great to detect the exploit, but it's even better if you can detect it and stop it. Okay, so threat detection, what does that mean to me? For the purpose of this conversation, it's identifying malicious actors and transactions in real time. So again, we're like a security camera that's watching everything happening, and we want to flag all the bad stuff. So, little context: when we started in November 2021, there was zero threat detection happening. A lot of that had to do with the fact that the industry was, 3.5 years more immature back then. But a lot of it had to do with the fact, too, that I think from a security standpoint, most people were very focused on code and pre-deployment security. There was very little attention, if any, paid to post-deployment security beyond a bug bounty program. And virtually zero part of the security budget was spent on that as well. So fast forward 2.5 years till now, there's a lot more threat detection happening. There are a dozen plus companies that do this really well today, including Forta. There are a lot more tools that are available to DeFi protocols that make this easier, and there's a ton of threat intelligence that's generated in real time that we can all use to protect ourselves. So how do we detect exploits? Little mental model I want you guys to walk away with. So most attacks follow these 4 stages. And I'll walk through them and kind of explain the flow here. So first is funding. So an attacker, when they're attacking a protocol, they need some capital to do that, at a minimum to pay for gas fees. They don't want to pull that out of their Binance account, for example, or their MetaMask wallet. So they're usually going to obfuscate the source of those funds through a privacy-preserving protocol like Tornado Cash. Then they're going to use those funds to deploy a new contract. We call this the attacker contract. This is the preparation stage of an attack. At some point, after they deploy the contract, they'll invoke that. It can happen in subsequent blocks. It can happen in the current block. But that's what we would consider the attack transaction. And then if the attack's successful and they have stolen funds, they will then re-launder those back through privacy protocols, DEXs, et cetera. At a minimum, you want to get out of assets that have a blacklist, like a USDC or something like that, right? So this is the flow that the vast majority of smart contract exploits follow. And I wanted to share this because I just wanted to show you there's a lot of things that happen before the exploit transaction. And these are all the signals that we're looking for when we're trying to detect exploits in advance. So the goal for us is to detect things with high confidence in the preparation stage of an attack. So right after that malicious smart contract's been deployed, we want to flag it, and we want to notify as many people as we can about it. We do a couple different things to those contracts. We'll do static analysis on it, which I'm going to talk a lot more about. That's where the machine learning comes in. We also do dynamic analysis, so we will fuzz the contract, we'll simulate it, we'll throw a bunch of parameters at it to see what happens. So let's talk a little bit more about the static analysis piece. So we train a model to try and tell the difference between a contract that's malicious and a contract that's benign. Obviously, if you have decades of data at your disposal, your model is going to be really good. We don't have that. We've got about 4 or 5 years of malicious smart contracts at our disposal. So we've got 700 sort of confirmed malicious smart contracts that we can train models with. We've got a heck of a lot more good benign contracts that we can use to differentiate. So that's helpful. I point this out just because as more contracts get deployed, the data set gets larger, models get better at learning, et cetera. So machine learning will keep getting more precise over time as it has more data. So what happens here? The model will essentially go in and it will extract the bytecode plus the inputs from the contract, convert them into opcodes, and then start analyzing patterns. And we want to analyze patterns from known malicious contracts with patterns from known benign contracts. Just to give you a sense of what some of the common opcode patterns are. This is in a blog post on the Forta website too, if you want to kind of read the more context around this. But on the left are the top 10 most common opcodes in malicious smart contracts. So you'll see at the top, it's like push 20, and push, et cetera. On the right are the top 10 most uncommon opcodes. So you're going to see a lot more of this in benign, non-malicious contracts. So we've got 700 examples of stuff on the left. We've got hundreds of thousands of examples of stuff on the right. And you train a model with this, and then you release it into the wild, and you let it predict. Whether the newest contract that gets deployed on chain is good or bad. So in practice, okay, I just walked through this. I front-run myself here. I'm going to skip this one. Okay, so the benefits of using ML as opposed to simple heuristics. So we do use a lot of heuristics, which are kind of more rigid, like hard-coded rules. But ML's great because it can come up with those heuristics for you. So the objective is to identify patterns. If you had a really small amount of data, which wouldn't be great for ML to begin with, you, in theory, could do this manually. But when you have hundreds of thousands of contracts that you're trying to look at, letting a machine analyze those patterns for you is just much more efficient. It's also going to be able to recognize patterns that we might not be able to identify ourselves. So up until now, everything I've described, we would call negative reputation-based monitoring. So we're looking for things that we know are bad, malicious. There's another form of monitoring that is also very effective, and that is sort of emerging in Web3, and it's called anomaly detection. And an anomaly is just something that looks weird or is different than what's normal. So in the context of a DeFi protocol, you would want to figure out what your normal user behavior looks like and kind of create a profile around that. And then use that sort of normal behavior profile to then screen that against incoming transactions to see if you see anything that doesn't look like that. If it doesn't look normal, you could label that as anomalous. A lot of exploits using this approach would be labeled as anomalous. And so this is another sort of complementary approach that you can use to detect exploits and other sort of threats in advance. Show of hands. How many people are surprised by this? So today, most smart contract exploits are detected in advance. Does that surprise anybody? Yeah. There are a lot of teams out there monitoring for this stuff today. You can monitor mempool transactions. You can monitor process transactions. You can use negative reputation-based approaches. You can use anomaly-based approaches. But there's a ton of people watching and analyzing smart contracts and transactions. And most exploits are detected in advance. Now, that does not mean that they are, just because they're detected doesn't mean that they're prevented. And I think DeFi protocols today, given all the threat intelligence that's now available, and there's just going to be more and more available to you. So detection is going to keep getting better and better, faster, more precise. DeFi protocols need to ask themselves now, if I know that a transaction or an EOA or an address is bad in advance, what do I want to do about it? Do I want to accept that? This is not a question that I think any smart contract developer has been forced to ask themselves previously because we just didn't have the data. But now that we do, I think this is a prudent thing to consider. What we're focused on for the last 2.5 years has been detection. There is a ton of this happening now. We're shifting our focus to prevention. So we got all this great data. Now how do we stop these attacks? And something that we're really interested in right now, and I just kind of want to plant a seed with the audience here, is transaction screening. So now that we have some sense of what's good and what's bad, in theory, you can stop bad stuff and let good stuff come through. Whereas previously, 100% of stuff was coming in, whether it was, whether you knew about it or not, whether it was good or bad. You can do transaction screening at the smart contract level. You can also do it lower in the tech stack and leverage builders and relayers and sequencers to do it there and just tell them, what logic you want them to follow. There are experiments happening at both levels. I'm really optimistic about both. It obviously brings up some questions around censorship, but I think those are, it's a welcome conversation to have, and I think there's a path forward. So I just wanted to plant that seed. I think over the next year or two, we're going to see a lot more experiments with transaction screening, simply because we have so much data now that it's prudent to at least start testing out that approach to see if you can stop exploits that way. So I'll stick around for a few minutes if anybody wants to chat about ML-based threat detection or transaction screening. Happy to chat. Thank you.